Okay, good morning. My name is Joni Ward, and I'll be leading today's service. Reverend Matt will be presenting our message this morning. Our opening words this morning are by the Reverend Joan Javier Duval, a Unitarian Universalist minister in Vermont. Much better.
You are beloved and you are welcome here.
Whether tears have fallen from your eyes this past week or gleeful laughter has spilled out of your smiling mouth.
You are beloved and you are welcome here.
Whether you are feeling brave or broken-hearted, defiant or defeated, fearsome or fearful,
you are beloved and you are welcome here.
Whether you have untold stories buried deep inside or stories that have been forced beyond the edges of comfort,
you are beloved and you are welcome here.
Whether you have made promises, broken promises, or are renewing your promises,
you are beloved and you are welcome here.
Whatever is in your heart, however it is with your soul in this moment,
you are beloved and you are welcome here.
In this space of welcome and acceptance, commitment and recommitment of covenant and connection,
you are beloved and you are welcome here.
Let us worship together. He got all the easy lines. Our announcements were on a slideshow before the service and were also sent out by email yesterday with the order of service today. The bells. And now a special welcome to our visitors. And I see a lot of faces today. If you are visiting with us for the first time or have returned or reconnected with us after a long absence, we invite you to say your name, to stand if you can, say your name and tell us where you're from, and Matt will bring a mic around. We'll start first, if you're on Zoom, raise your hand feature and we'll ask you to unmute. If you're in the room, just raise your hand and we'll start with the people in the room first. Oh, I knew there were new faces. Welcome, welcome.
Hi. Would you mind standing and saying your name and where you're from and all that good stuff?
Mary Keller, Ahihique.
Bienvenidos.
Welcome.
I'm Annie, and I'm from the United States, Colorado.
Welcome.
And you're back.
I'm back. I'm Carol Cummings Spears. It's my great delight to be here once more, and I'm from Montreal, Canada. The Unitarian Fellowship, or church actually, in Montreal. Thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah.
I'm Lamar Allen, returning from a little over half a year away, mostly in my native Texas, some in my wife's native Southern Ontario, where she's currently in a retirement home, and hope to get her back down here later this year. Glad to be here.
Welcome.
Great. Okay.
Okay. Do we have any Zoom people that are new to us today?
I don't see any on Zoom.
I can't see anything on Zoom. Okay, just a brief note. We offer a wide variety of services on various topics presented by our members, outside guests, as well as our minister, Reverend Matt Alspaugh. We hope you will return to sample this variety of thought and belief. Nice to have you back, Michael. Our chalice lighting words today are by the Reverend Connie Simon, a Unitarian Universalist minister in California. This is the hour. The time has come. Mindful of our responsibilities as leaders of this faith and guardians of the living tradition, we call upon the great cloud of witnesses, those who came before, those who are here now, and those who have yet to come. We seek their presence, love, and support in this place at this hour. We kindle this flame to light their path and call them near as we undertake the sacred work. Now let us light our chalice with these words that we sing together. Linda. We
kindle this light in celebration for the life that we share.
Our opening hymn is One More Step. Please raise in body or in spirit and join me in singing.
We will take one more step till there is peace for us, and everyone will take one more step. One more word, we will say one more word, till every word is heard by everyone. We'll say one more word, one more prayer. We will say one more prayer, till every bread is shared by everyone. We'll say one more prayer, one more song. We will sing one more song, till every song is heard by everyone. We'll sing one more song.
Okay, each week we take time to remind ourselves that we belong to a community which cares for each other. This sharing of joys, sorrows, milestones is one way that we practice holding one another in community. We speak what is in our hearts because there is power in the sharing. We will start with the folks in the room and give the folks in Zoom time to type in their joys and sorrows. First, let's recall the joys. Whatever you may be celebrating, whatever evokes a feeling of joy or peace for yourself or others. Heidi.
Good morning, I'm Heidi, and I'm happy to say that after almost 6 weeks or more, I'm not sure, I lost track, I'm finally back again, and hopefully for the first time in this community, this particular community, I'll be back from here on in. Thank you.
This is kind of a small one, but it was big for me. My 10-and-a-half-year-old grandson sent me an email the other day. It said, Mimi, guess what? We have a snow day. And I think he's getting another one tomorrow. They will.
Good morning. My name is Lynn. Our 26-year-old grandson has eloped to New Orleans and is marrying the love of his life, but his mother told him he was damn well not eloping without her. So they ended up inviting both parents to the elopement, but not the grandparents, sadly.
Well done.
I'm happy to announce my new granddaughter, Josie Trenholm Peel, and she's alive and kicking in North Carolina.
Oh, all right.
Okay. Up here.
Miguel.
Thank you. I think you know who I am. I'm Michael. I play the Joanna up here. Joanna is a Cockney name for piano. I have a great joy to share with you. Most of you know that I'm the artistic director and conductor of the Lake Chapala Orchestra, our very own professional orchestra here. And our next concert is the very end of March, over 2 months away. As a result of the last concert that we did just before Christmas, and several of you were there to hear the fantastic performance of the Rachmaninoff Second Piano Concerto, we have sold out those two performances for March and April within 2 weeks of that concert back in December. Never in the field of human ticket sales has this kind of thing been accomplished. I'm absolutely delighted. Chris Wiltshire, who many of you know is the artistic director of the upcoming festival, will be playing the brilliant Max Bruch Violin Concerto, and we'll be doing Beethoven's Fifth Symphony as well. But the thing is, basically, that it just shows the great community support that the cultural arts have in this community, and it truly is wonderful. And by the way, we're going to add a performance so you'll be able to buy tickets.
That's what I was going to say. I think it means more concerts.
Okay. Anybody else here in the room? Oh, okay.
Hey, hey.
After a very sudden and unexpected accident involving penguins, I broke my arm and I'm out of my splint and I have full range of motion.
Look out. Look out.
Okay, probably to Zoom now.
Are there
right?
any from Jim?
For Zoom, we have Terry Glenn sharing joy that Brazil is now beginning to enforce Amazon protection better than the previous administration. And that's it for Zoom joys.
Great. Okay, let us voice our sorrows or concerns, whatever you or the world may be holding that is in need of our healing and caring thoughts. Are there sorrows that people would like to share here in the room?
My name is Sharon, and I would just like your healing thoughts for friends of a couple who are friends of many people in this congregation. The husband fell and was hospitalized, and his wife is caring for him in their home near here, and we hope the best for them. No.
Any others in the room? Let me check back here. Okay.
Matt?
Oh, I thought I saw a yes.
Just sharing my concern for my lovely wife as she goes into her second chemotherapy this coming Friday.
Yes. Ongoing concern for Ukraine. Are there any sorrows to be shared on Zoom?
Yes, from Trudy Crippen. Concern for Francisco Lagunas, head of the Mexican City UU Group. His cousin, a rights attorney, was kidnapped in Michoacan. Lots of concern. And then concern for Jan Manning, who suffered a twisted ankle while on her motor scooter Friday night. This was also from Trudy Crippen. I would like to add that Carol Johnson saw Jan Manning yesterday, and Jan was actually doing pretty well.
Good.
So that's the end of our Concerns, hold it. We have another concern from Tom Mack for the people of Ukraine who continue to suffer from a harsh winter and constant bombardment. And that's it.
Thank you. And this big candle is from our care team. It represents the joys and sorrows we hold in silent sanctuary of our hearts. We light this candle for all those unspoken sorrows and joys. Thank you. Okay. There are many ways to be of service to LCUUF. Time, treasure, talents. Thank you. They're all necessary components to a healthy fellowship. Now is our time in the service when we ask you to share the gift of treasure through pledging and donations. Instructions for payments to the fellowship are on a slide during the announcements before every service, every week. For the people here at fellowship, we'll pass a basket. If you are new here today or you are struggling to hold things together, let the basket pass you by. Your presence is more than enough. It's a gift to us. While you're considering your gifts to the fellowship, remember that each month LCUUF donates 5,000 pesos or more, usually, to an organization in our Lakeside community. We share 1/2 of the offering collected at the fellowship each week with that organization. For the month of January, we are supporting Tepewa Centro Comunitario. This organization serves people in the Tepewa barrio of Chapala, which is one of the poorest barrios in the state of Jalisco. And in addition to food assistance, the Comunitario provides medical, dental care, teaches reading and English as a second language, and helps women start small businesses by training them in sewing skills. It's amazing.
And I want to invite you into a time of meditation. Just a time of quiet, a time of personal reflection. You might get comfortable in your seat or wherever you are. Close your eyes. You might simply start by noticing your breath. If you like, you might just draw in a deep breath and let it go out slowly, noticing how the out-breath allows you to relax. Maybe a couple of those deep breaths, and then just sit with your breath, noticing the in-breath, the out-breath. And now let us return to this place and this time to be together again.
Today's reading is called Long Haul People. And it's by Reverend Rudy Nimser, who was a Unitarian Universal minister. Please note that we've left the language in as Nimser wrote it. Feel free to substitute in your mind the word fellowship or congregation for his word church. You'll find them in churches when you're lucky, other places too, though I mostly only know ecclesiastical varieties. Long haul people. It's moving. Long haul people upon whose shoulders and pocketbooks and casseroles and daylight and nighttime hours, a church is built and maintained. After the brass is tarnished and cushions need restitching, they pay their pledges full and on time, even when the music's modern. Support each canvas, though the sermons aren't always short. They mow lawns and come to suppers. They teach Sunday school when there's no one else and they'll miss the service. Ask what they think of the minister, or plans for the kitchen renovation, or the choral anthem, or Christmas pageant, or the color of the bathroom paint. They'll reply, individuals and fashions arrive and pass. The church, their church, will be here, steady and hale. For a long time it will. For long haul people bless the church with a very special blessing. And I think those who are here, there are many.
As I thought about this theme, the state of the fellowship, I realized that one question that might be up right now is about growth. Is this fellowship growing? What do we do if it does grow, or if it doesn't? And I don't have good answers for these questions, but I thought it might be good to delve a little deeper in what we mean when we think about growth in congregations. So one of the most helpful discussions of congregational growth was by Lauren Mead, an expert on church vitality, who wrote a book called More Than Numbers, The Way Churches Grow. Now, admittedly, he was targeting mostly a Christian audience with this book, but it is, I think, in general applicable to just about any kind of congregation. He suggested that there were several ways that congregations grow in addition to numerical growth. And I realized that this model of congregational growth might be a helpful framework as we consider how LCUUF is doing right now and where we are going. Now, I actually touched on this work by Mead a few years ago. Mead defines several kinds of growth beyond merely numerical growth. But as an academic, he comes up with these high-sounding ecclesiastical names for these types of growth: maturational, organic, incarnational, as well as numeric growth. We just kind of blew all that off. Somebody else, actually, a UU, in fact, came up with simpler names for these growth, and that's what I'm going to use here: members, strength, action, wisdom, and connection. So let's start with the numbers. We have 133 members on the books right now compared to 94 members last year. So if I did the math right, I think that's about a 20% growth, which is wonderful. And I'm skipping all that part because I don't know the pledged numbers. And my sense is that we will continue to have steady numerical growth for the simple reason that people are moving down here to Lakeside. It's curious to me to find out that many of them are already Unitarian Universalists. So by and large, they are familiar with what we're about. Let me ask you right now, and I'm going to ask Richard to kind of put him on the spot on the Zoom side. How many of you were part of a Unitarian Universalist congregation at some point in your life before you came down here? And we have a remarkable number of hands in this room, probably two-thirds, half to two-thirds.
Now,
Richard, how does it look on Zoom? If you're on Zoom, turn
first,
your camera.
start your video, please, because otherwise I can't see your raised hands.
Oh,
I
okay,
see,
so,
right now I see half of them are have their hands up, a little more than half. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hands out of about 12 people, so more than half.
Okay, excellent. Excellent. And just to get the flip side, how many of you were never part of a UU congregation before? Okay, maybe half, maybe a little less. Okay, quite interesting. How about Richard, just checking to see if the other people know how to turn on their cameras?
Very few. I see only of the 10 people, I see only one hand of non-UUs.
Okay, great.
So our Zoomers are UUers too.
Yeah, and that's probably part of it is because I've realized that several of you that I've talked to had even researched LCUUF before you came down here. You had, tuned into some of our programs either on YouTube or on Zoom. And so you knew a little bit about this community already. And in a few cases, the existence of a Unitarian Universalist congregation was important to your decision to move to this particular place. So our numerical growth model, I think, is a little bit different than that of most congregations, UU congregations, churches, fellowships, whatever, north of the border. But in addition to growth in numbers, we have these other growths. Strength. Strength is about what does our organization have in its structures, its procedures, the culture to support the membership at the size we are at. Are all the pieces in place to supporting our mission or our essential purpose in the world? And oftentimes, issues around growth in strength arise when a congregation grows or perhaps declines numerically. So for example, the congregation continues to grow in attendance, more people join, but some of the practices remain relics of an earlier size. And those practices are unable to handle perhaps the increased number of folks. Oftentimes, congregations will hold on to forms of leadership that were suitable for a former size, but don't work well at the new size. Now, one of the things I appreciate about LCUUF is that we have a culture that allows people to get things done without a lot of tedious bureaucracy or some long drawn out approval process. And people step up and get things done. I am delighted that there are so many teams and committees that operate in a semi-autonomous way. The board lets them do their work, and I can remain relatively hands-off. And in fact, I somewhat secretly relish the fact that many of our teams, the care team, membership, social action, function quite well without me attending their meetings. Thank you very much. After all, I'm a part-time person, and I want to stay that way. But that's not all. Sometimes things just seem to happen here at the fellowship without any formal direction. Every Sunday, people set up the chairs, get out the cushions, and put them away at the end of the service. All these things are the work of, I think, long-haul people, the ones who bless this fellowship with a very special blessing. Now, taken to the extreme, we could even achieve a kind of leaderless leadership, or maybe more precisely, group leadership. So what does group leadership look like in real life? Well, maybe we can get an idea from bird brains. No, I don't mean that as a personal comment. You see, not long ago, I was watching a flock of starlings that came to feed on the lawn. And every now and then something would disturb them and they would fly off up into a tree. But I watched how these birds made this group decision. One of them might hop up a little bit and then come back down to the ground if the other ones didn't follow. But after a while, 2 or 3 would hop up, and then there would be sort of this critical mass where they would several of them would lift, and then all of them would lift, and they would all fly up to the tree. So without a specific leader, these birds could still act as a group. Even massive numbers of birds can do this. These starlings in Europe join together in massive flocks. They call them murmurations. And they fly together, actually warming their bodies in the late evening before bedding down for the night. There is no leader, but the flock somehow has a sense of direction. And these birds never collide with each other. Apparently, this kind of behavior can arise when each bird monitors the location of just maybe a half a dozen other birds nearby. That's enough to link all the birds together into a tight network. Now, obviously, not every situation calls for leaderless leadership. Sometimes you need a decisive leader. You know, like in a fire, you would really want to have somebody who knows how to get people out of the building fast. But I wonder if at times we can create too many structures, committees, procedures, meeting minutes, because we are afraid of what might come out of group leadership. I think the challenge is finding the right balance in leadership, where at times you do need a solo leader, and at other times group leadership or the leadership of the whole is more correct. Now, the next area of growth is growth in action. How does the congregation, how does this fellowship act in the world around us? Are we merely focused on serving our own membership, or do we reach out to serve the community in some way? I am very happy that we now have an organized social action team, which is organizing witness events, reaching out to other community service organizations to work together on things, and planning Sunday services on social action topics. I think a key part of this social action work is learning through doing. That concept of action reflection that I talked about a couple of weeks ago. We try different things to help people out around us and to make social change. And then we reflect on what worked and what didn't work. Now, after all, most of us have migrated from places up north into this Latin American culture, which is different. And we find that many of the concepts that worked in our home countries don't quite work the same here. I mean, Mexico has much to teach us, not just about its culture, but Mexico can help us learn about ourselves. Which kind of leads into the next area of growth, which is wisdom. And the idea is this, that each of us ought to be growing in wisdom, in maturity, in spirituality. We delve into the deep questions of life. Who are we? Why are we here? Where are we going? Does it even matter? We each find different answers to these questions. That is, of course, because this is a UU space here. And this fellowship ought to be helping us grow, helping us move along our spiritual paths. But not only are we on different paths, we are in different places along those paths. So spiritual growth for UUs cannot be a one-size-fits-all proposition. Sunday mornings are especially tricky because they have to appeal to a wide variety of folks. But smaller groups, like our humanist discussion group or our meditation group or our women's group, have long been part of this wisdom work here in this fellowship. Part of our congregation's growth ought to be creating more of these small group opportunities that foster our individual spiritual growth. And as we grow in numbers, we can offer more options for people. And finally, we have growth in connection. How are we connected with other Unitarian Universalist organizations and congregations? How can we help each other growing through connection? We had hoped to develop stronger connection with the other two UU congregations in Mexico, in San Miguel de Allende and in Mexico City. This is a picture of the folks from Mexico City. But this has been a slower and more complicated path than we thought. Didn't I say something earlier about Mexico? We hope to continue doing this work, though. I would love to see some kind of network where we connect perhaps not only with the established congregations, but perhaps with smaller groups of UUs or individual UUs who might exist in other places in Mexico. Now, some of you may wonder about our connection with the Unitarian Universalist Association in the USA or the Canadian Unitarian Council. The truth is, we don't have formal connections, since we are not part of the USA or Canada. We do have informal connections, yes. I've received some help from the southern region of the UUA and work with the UU Ministers Association as well. But in general, we're largely left to our own devices down here in Mexico. And even though we're not formally connected with the UUA or the CUC, to use those acronyms, we might want to pay attention to what those groups are up to. Let me give you an example. The UUA is considering a rewrite of the principles and purposes of its bylaws. Now, you probably know the principles well. These are those 7 principles that form the foundation of much of our theological and ethical thinking, even here in this fellowship. Here they are. Sorry for the small type, but probably many of you almost know these by heart, or at least have a general idea of some of them. Now, what you may not know is that these principles were never intended to be static and unchanging. From the very beginning, there has been a worry that they might become some kind of fixed creed. And you know how much creed cringe we as Unitarian Universalists have. And there are good historical reasons for that. So the UUIA bylaws, in fact, require that these principles and purposes be re-examined periodically. And the UUA is doing just that right now. There is a group called the Article 2 Study Commission. Now, Article 2 is the technical name for the principles and purposes in the bylaw. That's their place in the bylaw, Article 2. And yes, we UUs can be pretty unimaginative in naming things. Now, this commission has been working on this re-examination since 2020. And they released a report just this last week, I believe it was Wednesday, which included the proposed revision of Article 2, specifically offering a new version of the principles as a list of 7 shared values. And we're going to read this revision to you now.
As Unitarian Universalists, we covenant congregation to congregation and through our association to support and assist one another in our ministries. We draw from our heritages of freedom, reason, hope, and courage, building on the foundation of love. Love is the power that holds us together. It is the center of our shared values. We are accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared values through the spiritual discipline of love. Inseparable from one another, these shared values are
interdependence. We honor the independent web of all existence. We covenant to cherish Earth and all beings by creating and nurturing relationships of care and respect. With humility and reverence, we acknowledge our place in the great web of life, and we work to repair harm and damaged relationships.
Pluralism. We celebrate that we are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experience, and theology. We covenant to learn from one another in our free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We embrace our differences and commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect.
Justice. We work to be diverse, multicultural, beloved communities where all thrive. We covenant to dismantle racism and all forms of systemic oppression. We support the use of inclusive democratic processes to make decisions.
Transformation. We adapt to the changing world. We covenant to collectively transform and grow spiritually and ethically. Openness to change is fundamental to our Unitarian and Universalist heritages, never complete and never perfect.
Generosity. We cultivate a spirit of gratitude and hope. We covenant to freely and compassionately share our faith, presence, and resources. Our generosity connects us to one another in relationship of interdependence and mutuality.
Equity. We declare that every person has the right to flourish with inherent dignity and worthiness. We covenant to use our time, wisdom, attention, and money to build and sustain fully accessible and inclusive communities.
Now, this is just a draft, and it will very likely be modified by amendments by the UUA board, and then at the 2023 General Assembly in Pittsburgh this June, where it will be voted on for the first time. If it passes through that 2023 General Assembly, it must be voted on again at the 2024 General Assembly. Sometimes denominational work grinds exceedingly slowly and finely. Now, the question for us here might be, what does this have to do with us? Now, we are not bound by whatever is ultimately approved in the same way that congregations in the USA might be. Further, our Canadian Unitarians might do their own thing, something completely different. I think of this in the manner of an analogy. For me, for many of us, the 7 principles have been kind of a North Star, offering guidance, a sense of direction as we sort out how we ought to live. And assuming this recommendation passes, we may have another source of guidance, kind of like magnetic north, available to us. Now, most of you know that magnetic north and geographic north, that is the North Star, don't line up precisely in most places. And you have to choose one to work with if you're doing direction finding, let's say wandering around in the mountains here or whatever. You have to adjust for the deviation. And we here in this fellowship may find ourselves in a similar situation. We may have to choose or convert, perhaps retaining the existing 7 principles, perhaps adopting these 7 values, perhaps doing something else altogether. I think having to consider this choice is a good thing, for it might cause us to think deeply about who we are and what we are about. There is a lovely quote by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, the author of The Little Prince. Now, it usually goes like this: If you want to build a ship, don't drum up the men to gather wood, divide the work, and give orders. Instead, teach them to yearn for the vast and endless sea. Now, I had trouble verifying the origin of this quote on the internet, and I finally gave up and called the library reference desk in my town in the USA. And a very helpful librarian, who was curiously a Unitarian Universalist, was able to identify the reference along with a commentary that translation was from the French was a very poor early one. So a more complete translation might go like this. If I awaken in people a love of sailing, then they will follow their passion in 1,000 directions. One will make sails, another will cut wood, another forge nails, another will learn celestial navigation. But building a ship is not merely making sails or nails or reading the stars. It is also awakening within the hearts of all the desire for the vast and endless sea. And this is the way I would love to see us work together as a community, with each of us doing our parts, following our passions, and together all of us as leaders, all of us are leaders in our own way, awakening within each of our hearts the desire to find profound meaning and purpose in the vast and endless spiritual sea.
I think it's
We'll build a land when we bind up the broken. We'll build a land where the captives go free, where the oil of gladness dissolves all mourning. Oh, we'll build a promised land that can be. Come, build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, and then create peace where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream. We'll build a land where we bring the good tidings to all the afflicted and those who mourn, and we'll give them gardens instead of ashes. Oh, we'll build a land where peace is born. Come, build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, men create peace where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream. We'll build a land building up ancient cities, raising up devastations from old, restoring ruins of generations. Oh, we'll build a land of people so bold. Come, build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, then create peace where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream. Come, build a land where the mantles of praises resound from spirits one faints and one sweet, where like oaks of righteousness stand her people. Oh, come, build a land my people will see. Come, build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God,
May we go from this place remembering that this community is bound together by joy and love. The joy of being together in a magnificent quest for purpose and understanding, and the love of all of us for each other, who have discovered in our hearts a yearning for the vast and endless spiritual sea.
Let us extinguish our chalices with these words, which we read together. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we keep in our hearts and share with all the world.
The postlude, ladies and gentlemen, is Auld Lang Syne. Now, traditionally, this will be played on New Year's Eve or New Year's Day, but I'm afraid I was on the beach at that time and was not able to play it here. So I only get a chance to play it once a year. I thought, well, it's still January, I'll play it. But I thought there must be another connection. Well, of course, it's the Chinese New Year. Auld Lang Syne.
Of course, Chinese New Year, Kong Hei Fat Joy. I think it's the year of the conejo. Okay. Our worship is over. Our service begins. Go in peace and with a purpose.